Hi there, this is I think a bit of a filler video in between me finishing the last battle that I played in this game of Austerlitz, 1805, Napoleon's greatest victory, and me playing the whole full shebang. So I've just set up the maps as a few days ago as like proof of concept. I can just about fit it in. It's all a bit dark and dingy over there, but we don't have to worry about that, I do not think, so much. Although this, yeah, no, sorry, yeah. So this here is the Olmers Road. So you're going to have Bagration's corps here, coming up against Larne here. Then these are the Prats and Heights, and that was the Pheasantry, the Sokolnitz Castle, Sokolnitz itself, and Telnitz. So those are the immediate objectives of the Allies. The Russians and Austrians are going to start here, kind of swoop down there with the hope that they will move around this way and drive the French up here and off the map and to their doom, I guess. And then the French, of course, are kind of attacking this way and this way, but I think as historically, I think Bagration successfully held them off. I don't remember that now, but yeah. So you can see it's there's quite an impressive layout there. What was it, 150, I think, meters a hex. Essentially, this is all clear terrain, and the heights is easily movable up and down, unless it's sort of steep ones, like the first one you add an extra is nothing, and the second one you add an extra movement point. So if, say, you're travelling from here, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. There are a few steeper ones here. Those are 2 movement points to go up, and those ones, I'm not sure, I haven't used them that, they might be 3 or impassable, I don't remember. So we've got swampy land here, and we've got the great pond there, impassable, as is that. So this is all familiar terrain. Here's this grand total of all the limbs in the game, so you can see in my little cup here you could have a whole bunch if everybody is being activated, but they will not be all at the same time, and it's a bit deceptive in that, okay, these are the Allies, and essentially you have the corps, and then if once, or you can have the divisions from the corps. So most corps, the Allies side have 2 divisions, some have 3, and it's this. In fact, on the Allies side, they're strictly their columns. So you've got like the advance guard, first column, second column, third column, fourth column, and then cavalry reserve, 2 different sections of that, Bagration himself, and then the Imperial Guard. And the French is similar, but you can see that the 4th Corps, it has a lot of divisions in there. And the Imperial Guard, infantry and cavalry, they're separate, essentially under the command of Napoleon as separate divisions. So already you can see that the Allies have more to wield in the sense of corps. So which might tell you that the French could be more nimbler, because they're sort of more compact in their command structure. It's not so spread out, and that is going to bear out quite a lot in how the activations happen. I'll just give you a look at the end of the last battle. Essentially, I think I videoed it before from this angle, but essentially what happened was you have the Allies up here, and each column, so the advance guard and the first column are tasked with taking Telnitz, second column it actually went at cross purposes. So I think the second had to take the pheasantry and Sokolnitz Castle, and then the third column to take Sokolnitz town itself. But because I had learnt with the Bagration scenario that it's easy to, if you activate a corps full activation or even divisions too soon, they fatigue very quickly. So as not to do that, either you're in strategic movement where you can move very fast. If you're not in strategic movement, then you can only do limited movement, which is half movement. And then what with the fog at the beginning of this limited movement, it took a long time to get over here. And essentially the upshot of it is that the Allies took Telnitz, and they heavily contested Sokolnitz. They never really made a dent in the pheasantry and the castle. Partly because you can see these French, so although they're very weak, 1 strength, they have 7 morale. Now, on a D10, you can imagine you're 7 or under, your most, and 0 is 0, or 10. There isn't a 10 on the die, so there's only 2 pips above it out of 10 pips. So 4/5 of the time they're passing their morale, and because they're in woods, any of the fire coming at them is down 2 levels anyway, so that made it impossible to inflict any actual strength losses, only morale hits, and with them mostly saving all their morale rolls. Even those small companies of like Tyrelius, which is what these represent, were impossible to budge, even with two whole columns. Two whole divisions fighting against essentially 1 brigade. Could not budge them. And rather late in the day, I started to move one of those columns around. That was the only way it was really going to happen, was to either dislodge them by manoeuvre or to surround them so that they could be attacked from the rear with extra bonuses on that. And the division here, the column here, didn't have any artillery, so that was awkward. So again, we had 2 divisions here trying to take here, and again we have very powerful, high morale French units. And there weren't many to start with, but the French had reinforcements coming on here and here, and this is what will happen historically, because that scenario started here. Here's Allied reinforcements, and then the rest are just French reinforcements. And I went... There's 1 small Allied reinforcement there. I went all the way to here, or about here I think it was, before I called it, because the Allies just had no hope, essentially because I made the mistake of sending in the advance guard and a column of 2 divisions all at the same time in towards Telnitz, so they were all activated and getting fatigued, but not enough space to do anything. I should have held 1 whole column back and exhausted 1 column, then sent the advance guard, and then sent the other column in, and then they might have been able to take that more rapidly and then move around and outmaneuver, so essentially surround the others and take it. There just wasn't enough time because the French had brought in reinforcements. They essentially set up a line here, heavy cavalry and a strong division, which would take time to batter. And again, essentially what the Allies would have to do is to send in a whole column, exhaust that, and then have another column or 2 ready to swoop around. There just wasn't enough time in the game day to do that. So very interesting lessons learned in this system and playing the scenarios. I'm really looking forward to playing the whole shebang, because what you find with the combat is it gets decisive very quickly. You can kind of see it a bit here. Although the Allies here have pulled away, essentially they were right up in there and battling away. But they either somebody, if you get shaken is is a sort of least bad morale state after good. Then you get unsteady, and then you get rout. Now shaken's okay, but if the unit next to you becomes unsteady or routs, then the unit that you have to roll. So this fellow had to roll when he became unsteady, and if he failed his morale check, and his morale is 4, so you can see that's only 50% of the time he's going to make it on the 0 to 9 roll. He's going to become shaken, and then say if he then becomes unsteady or something, and he's already shaken, he quickly goes to unsteady, and then you can have like a chain reaction going through. Give me 2 minutes, Joshie. And so the combat gets decisive very quickly, in that you bring 2 lines close together, and quite quickly one of them is going to cause a hole in the other, and there'll be a bit of a chain reaction, and so you'll start losing your middle or one of your flanks, and then you're probably going to pull back. But it can get sort of undecisive, in the sense that you can see these guys are high up. This represents states of exhaustion, 9 being the highest that you can possibly get, and you're starting to take detriments, i.e. people start to be automatically unsteady at 6, I believe. So what can happen is that, say this is defending hard, so these start losing men, retreating, and because you retreat back a hex when you come unsteady, and routing away. But then these become exhausted, and so they can't sort of press their gain. So one side might fall back, and the other side can't necessarily make a decisive affair of it by sort of going in on the bayonet charge themselves, unless you had reserves. So what I mean by the combat getting decisive is that someone becomes, either one or both of you become exhausted quite quickly, and it will stop. And then the only way it's really going to become properly decisive is if you have, say, a cavalry reserve that could suddenly come in and start decimating unsteady and routed units, or a whole nother division or a whole other corps that could come in and finish off that column or division that you are against, for example. And I didn't manage that, or essentially the French didn't have enough people. They were just hanging on there, and the Allies, I didn't manage well enough to do that. They did have that potential. So this game is not really about sort of lines lining up and spending a long time in combat and then one of them crumbling under attrition, as you might get in La Bataille somewhat, because the morale is not such a powerful factor as it is here. Instead, what you're going to happen is, what's going to be important is manoeuvre and reserves, and those are linked through the fatigue and the activation rules. So your manoeuvre is either it's strategic, in which case you can get somewhere quickly, but then it takes time to sort yourself out before you can't get up too close to an enemy, and it takes time to deploy, depending on your fortune in the activation, before you can then go into action. Or you're going to be sending your guys in at full activation turn after turn, and they're going to be exhausting too quickly. Or you're going to be operating under limited activation, which means they're at half movement rate, and so they're moving quite slowly. So that's speaking to manoeuvre. It's going to be very interesting to sort out, okay, which column, for example, am I going to have on strategic, and then following them up with like a common column on limited movement, and then who am I going to be able to send into full activation and when, and then when we get to the battle, who am I holding reserve, and who will I be able to activate and when, to deliver the decisive blow after we've exhausted the enemy and our kind of frontline troops. I think it's going to be all about that, and it's very interesting to contemplate how I'm going to manage that for both of the sides, particularly because the Allies have a lot less able to bring in for what's called the command change. So you will start with a certain number of these in the cup, and then you want to bring more in, and the ones that become exhausted, you want to take them out of the cup. The ones that go out, you put here, and they start recovering from the fatigue. And then the ones that you've had in reserve that are available, you need to get into the cup, and that depends on this table. So on a D10 roll, you could either, if you roll a 1 or a 2 for the French, you add 1 corps and 2 divisions. So the French on 1 or a 2. So what is that? So for both of them, that's a fifth of the time they will get that. Otherwise, another fifth of the time, they're only going to get 1 division, and then 3/5 of the time there's going to be no change. So you can imagine, in an hour, that's 3 turns in this game. The chances are you might only activate at 1 division, and is it going to be too late? And the French even get maybe 3 divisions maximum at any one time. It's going to be frustrating as well, and I'm a little kind of irked in the sense that I really like the command structure and the reserves and the fatigue and activation and so forth, but this command change table is going to make it really frustrating, because you're going to know how you want it to pan out, but you're going to be at the extreme fate of the dice gods into if it's going to be possible in the time scale you need. And so you're kind of juggling with quite a sort of strict series of rules and decisions to make on who to leave out, when to bring someone in, and so forth. But at the end of the day, you'll just be hanging on the dice gods to see how it actually happens, or rather when it actually happens, and that's going to determine the thing. So yeah, and it's interesting to compare this to other games. I've got I think Austerlitz is probably the most gamed Napoleonic battle in my library. So I've got this one by Keith Poulter and Jim Hind, which I videoed not too long ago. And you can see it's a lot smaller map, but it has everything. There's Sokolnitz, Telnitz, the castle, the pheasantry, and there's the Olmutz Road, which is prime on here. It's like you get faster movement on that road if you're in column running up it. So we could get some rapid transit from reserves along there. And in my game of this, I remember it ended up in a lot, in sort of 1, 2, there was sort of 3 combats here, here and here. And they were quite long drawn out affairs, indecisive up until the end. And I don't think that's going to be possible here because of that exhaustion. 2 combatants could keep on at it if they were exhausted, but their units are just going to start melting away very quickly due to morale loss because of that. Another one I have is the Eagles of the Empire, Napoleonic Battles Austerlitz by Rob Markham. This is a great little system, which, I mean, this system never took off, and this one's sort of got stuck in a backwater, unfortunately, partly because, look at that map, it's hideous, like, computer graphic. I mean, fair enough, you know, you're a small company bringing something out, it's fair enough, I understand it, but it's completely functional, and I had a interesting game on this, but I remember finding it a bit unsatisfying, and although we've got the we've got Sokolnitz here. Yeah, that's right. So it's got Castle Sokolnitz. So the castle, the pheasantry is not detailed, it's not necessary, and Telnitz isn't even on this, which was a sort of major part of the Allied effort, you know, to flank around. So you haven't even got that possibility really of that proposed flanking manoeuvre unless you go a bit further up here in this. But you have something else. You actually have the town of Austerlitz itself. So there was a lot more on the back on this map that wasn't on the others. So it's a bit, there was a bit more availability for manoeuvre. But it's kind of strange because, you know, you do have this major barrier here and the stream and the pond there, which means that this isn't really going to come into play. So you could have sort of quite a historical freewheeling combat there. I also have Napoleon's Triumph, which is a great, very different rendition game of the battle. I'm not going to get all of them out. And I have the Napoleonic Brigade series battle on this, which was what first introduced me to this battle itself. It really got me kind of going on it to buy other titles on it, and that is an excellent system. And it's been so long, it's one of the first videos I ever made, so I can't remember how my battle of that turned out, but it's there in the videos. So anyway, that's all just to say really that this system does look very interesting, and can't wait to see how it pans out in the whole shebang. Coming to you soon. It's going to take a while to set it up, and I think I'll just try and do one or two other videos explaining my experiences of the battle and the system and how it sort of pans out, and trying to do what what it lets you do and what it doesn't let you do. Excuse me, it's not the virus, that's dust. Yeah, and then maybe, you know, kind of like a review type video after my experience of all the play of this sometime later. So that's it for now. Over and out.